Max didn't run like he used to. His back legs stiffened when he stood, and the fur around his muzzle had gone snowy white. But when Jake opened the door that morning and said, "Let's go, buddy," Max still perked up. His tail wagged just a little, like it remembered what it was like to chase danger instead of squirrels. They headed into the woods behind. Jake's house routine by now? Trees stood bare, leaves crunching beneath their boots and paws. A light fog hovered low and quiet. Jake stuffed his hands in his jacket pockets. "You know, I used to read stories about you," he said. Glancing at Max, "They called you a legend in training?" Max trotted ahead, nose twitching at the air. Jake chuckled. "You don't care, do you?" They reached the clearing, just a patch of wet earth and scattered pine needles. Jake looked up at the sky, gray and still, but Max froze. His ears pricked. Up. Jake frowned. "What is it?" Max didn't move. His nose dropped to the ground, and he sniffed hard twice, 3 times. Then he began to dig, slow at first, then faster. Dirt flew behind him. "Max?" Jake walked closer, heart picking up. "What did you find?" Max didn't answer, of course. Just kept pawing the earth like something had called him here. Jake dropped to his knees beside him and pushed some of the dirt aside. His fingers hit metal. They both paused. Jake brushed away the rest of the dirt until the top of a small metal box appeared, rusted, dented, maybe a foot wide. There was no lock on it anymore. Just a broken latch, barely holding the lid down. He hesitated. "What the hell is this doing out here?" Max sat, eyes locked on the box. Jake opened it. Inside were papers folded and stained with time. A photo, a bracelet made of pink string with plastic beads. ELLIE. Jake's stomach dropped. He picked up the photo. A little girl smiled back at him, maybe 6 years old, missing front teeth. Mud stained the bottom corner. Behind her stood an old swing set, the kind you see in forgotten yards. Max winked quietly. Jake whispered, "Where did this come from, Max?" He sifted through the papers. One looked like a police report, partly torn, soaked in something dark. Another looked like a page from a notebook with a child's handwriting. "I'm scared. Please come get me." Jake stood, breath shaky. He looked down at Max. Did you bring me here on purpose?" Max didn't move. His eyes stayed on the box. Jake's mind raced. He remembered the missing person flyers from over a decade ago. A girl named Ellie. He was just a kid when that case hit the news. She'd vanished without a trace. It had haunted the town for years. Jake knelt again. "You knew, didn't you?" "Somehow, you knew." Max laid his head on Jake's knee, silent. Jake closed the box slowly, hands trembling. This wasn't just some forgotten junk buried in the woods. This was evidence. Maybe even a piece of the truth. Jake looked around the woods suddenly, too. "Quiet," he whispered. "Why now?" Max lifted his head again, nose pointing deeper into the trees. Jake followed his gaze. There was nothing there. Just mist and shadows. Still, something inside Jake told him this was only the beginning. He stood up, cradling the box in his arms. "Come on, Max," he said quietly. "Let's go home." Max followed, limping slightly, but his eyes never left the woods behind them. When they got home, Jake placed the box on the kitchen table and turned on the lamp. He pulled out each item one by one. There was a receipt dated 2013, a torn fabric, ribbon, a crumpled piece of a map. Jake took photos of everything. "I don't know if this was buried by the killer," he muttered, "or by someone trying to tell the truth." Max sat in the corner watching him. Jake stared at the photo again. "Ellie," he whispered. He remembered something vaguely. His father, a decorated officer, once mentioned that name. Late at night, after a few drinks, he'd say things like, "Some cases don't get solved because they're not allowed to." Jake picked up his phone. "I need to call this in." Max barked once soft, low. Jake turned to him. "You okay?" Max didn't bark again. He walked slowly to the back door and stared outside. Jake followed his gaze. Just trees. Just fog. He felt his skin crawl. Later that night, Jake couldn't sleep. He sat on the edge of his bed, staring at the box now locked in his safe. Max slept at the foot of the bed, breathing slow. "Steady." Jake whispered into the dark. "You've seen things I haven't you, Max?" The old dog twitched slightly, but didn't wake. Jake leaned back against the headboard. Thoughts swirled. Why was the box buried now? Why in these woods? And how did Max know exactly where to dig? Something about the bracelet stuck with him. Ellie, the little girl in the photo. Her eyes wide and hopeful, he felt a pit in his stomach. The police report mentioned unsolved. He'd seen it in the archives. But no suspects. No evidence. Nothing had ever turned up. Until now. Jake closed his eyes, but sleep didn't come. And outside, deep in the woods, something moved. The next morning, Max waited by the door before Jake even reached for his coffee. Jake raised an eyebrow. You want to go back, don't you? Max barked once. Jake nodded slowly. All right, he said. Lead the way. And just like that, the old K9, limping slow and full of secrets, walked back toward the trees. Jake followed, the box locked in. His backpack, heart beating louder than his footsteps. Whatever Max had started wasn't finished yet. The precinct smelled like burnt coffee and old paper. Jake stepped in with Max at his side and the rusted box in his hands. Heads turned. No one spoke. Not yet. Sergeant O'Neill looked up from his desk. What's that? Jake. Set the box down. Something Max found. In the woods behind my property. Max sat silently beside him, still and alert. O'Neill opened the box slowly. His eyes narrowed as he picked up the photo and the bracelet. Ellie, he murmured. No way. Jake nodded. It's her, isn't it? O'Neill sighed. Looks like it. She vanished 12 years ago. The whole town searched for months. Forest was combed over and over. Never found a thing. Jake pointed at the photo. That swing set. Do you recognize it? O'Neill squinted. Might have been from the old Garrison house. Long since torn down. The girl's family moved out of state after she disappeared. Jake leaned in. Why was this buried now? Why in my woods? Max let out a low whine. His tail thumped once against the floor. O'Neill's eyes shifted to him. That dog still got it, huh? Jake smiled faintly. Apparently. They reviewed the rest of the contents. The receipt dated just days before Ellie's disappearance from a nearby diner. The crumpled map, hand-drawn, with a big red X marked near the edge of the forest. And the torn report, a partial police record with blacked-out names. Jake's voice was low. Why do I feel like someone wanted this box found? O'Neill gave him a long look. Because someone probably did, Jake hesitated, then spoke. I think it's connected to my dad, O'Neill stiffened. Your dad? Jake nodded. He worked the Ellie case, right? I remember him coming home. Agree, said someone was blocking him. O'Neill ran a hand over his face. Yeah, he got too close. Started accusing people up the chain. Saw it evidence had gone missing. The next month, he was gone. Jake swallowed hard. Official report said a drunk driver hit him. That, what it said, O'Neill muttered. But some of us, we wondered. Max stood and nudged Jake's leg with his nose. Jake looked down. You found this for a reason, didn't you, boy? Max barked once. O'Neill sat back in his chair, sighing deeply. I can reopen the case, Jake, but this has gone to rattle cages. I'm ready, Jake said. Ellie deserves the truth. So does my dad, the sergeant nodded. All right, but tread carefully. This town's got long shadows. That night, Jake couldn't stop thinking about the bracelet. He held it in, his hand feeling the little plastic beads. They were light, cheap, but somehow they carried weight, history, pain. He glanced at Max. The old dog lay near the fireplace, ears twitching slightly. You were there the whole time, huh? Jake whispered. You served with Dad. You were there when this all happened. Max lifted his head slowly. Jake continued. Do you remember her? Max didn't move, just stared. Jake sighed. I wish you could talk. But maybe Max was talking in. The only way he knew how. Jake rose and opened his dad's old file box from the closet. Dust coated the top. Inside were faded clippings, old photos, and a small black notebook. He flipped through the pages. Too clean, one note read. No prints, no evidence. Like someone cleaned it before we even arrived. Another, Ellie's family is scared. Won't talk. Mother keeps glancing at the chief. Jake stared at that line. The chief. Max barked twice, loud, urgent. Jake jumped. What is it? Max ran to the back door, pawing at it. Jake opened it, flashlight in hand. What are you seeing? The forest was pitch black. Nothing but the wind. Max growled low in his throat. Eyes fixed on the trees. Jake stepped outside, heart pounding. There, just beyond the tree line, a flicker of movement. A shadow, gone in a blink. Jake gripped the flashlight tighter. Someone's out there. He knelt by Max. You think they're watching us? Max didn't bark again. Just stared into the dark. Jake backed inside and locked the door. In the early hours of the morning, Jake returned to the precinct. O'Neill was all ready. They're waiting. I checked the diner receipt, O'Neill said. Ellie and her mom were there the day before she vanished. Guess who else was logged on shift? Jake raised an eyebrow. Deputy Chief Langston. Jake's blood ran cold. You think? I think he's connected. And if that bracelet really belonged to Ellie, we might have our first real evidence in years. Jake nodded. Then let's follow it. O'Neill handed him a folder. Keep this safe. I pulled what I could from the archives. There's more, but access is restricted. Jake frowned. Restricted how? Internal affairs? Locked files. Jake stared at the folder. Max stood beside him, tail low but steady. Jake said softly, let's dig deeper. Max's ears flicked forward. Jake looked down at him and smiled. Faintly, looks like we're partners now? As he stepped out of the precinct into the breaking dawn, Jake glanced at the tree line across the street. It felt different now, like the woods were watching him, back and somewhere deep inside them. The truth waited. Waiting to be unearthed, just like that rusted box. Just like Ellie, just like Max's silent memories. Jake sat cross-legged on the floor of his small living room, surrounded by old boxes his mom had never thrown away. Most were filled with his father's. Things, files, medals, old notebooks that smelled like time. Max lay beside him, chin on his paws, eyes tracking every movement. You remember these days, huh? Jake said softly, pulling out an old photo. It showed Max young, sharp-eyed, standing next to Jake's father in full uniform. Both looked proud, fierce, untouchable. Jake's voice cracked. You were his partner, and now you're mine. Max blinked slowly, as if understanding. Jake set the photo down and opened a dusty folder marked personal. R. Thomas. Inside, printouts of old reports, scribbled notes, and one small envelope with ELLI written in his dad's handwriting. Misspelled. Or maybe hurried. Jake's heart skipped. He pulled out the single sheet inside. A letter. Jake, if you ever find this, something went wrong. I tried to do the right thing, but they stopped me. Max knows. He always knew. Follow him if you need to. He'll lead you home. Jake sat frozen, reading the lines over and over. Max shifted, pressing closer. Did he plan for this? Jake whispered. Did he know they'd shut him up? Max stood, padded over to the front door, and scratched lightly. Jake looked up. Again? You want to go back? Max scratched once more, insistent. Jake grabbed his coat. All right, then. Show me. The air was colder than yesterday, thicker as they stepped into the forest. Jake kept his eyes on Max, who moved slower now, but with purpose. They passed the spot where the box had been found. Max didn't stop. He pushed forward through brush and tangled roots, until he arrived at an old oak tree-thick hollow at the base. Jake crouched beside him. Something here? Max sniffed, pawed once, and sat. Jake pulled out his flashlight and peered into. The hollow. Inside, wrapped in plastic and dirt, was another small bundle. Jake carefully pulled it out. His fingers were trembling. Inside the plastic, a faded children's book, a red shoelace, and a cassette tape. Jake stared. A tape? He looked at Max. Who would leave this here? Max just stared. Jake whispered, whoever it was. They trusted you. Back home, Jake dug out an old cassette player from the attic. The tape clicked in. He hit play. A child's voice came through, shaky and whispering. My name is Ellie. I'm in a room. There's a blue light on the wall. He says I can't leave. Please tell my mom. I'm scared. Then silence. Jake's heart slammed in his chest. Max barked softly, a whimper almost. Like he recognized the voice, Jake played it again. Same words. Same desperation. He stared at Max. This was real. She was alive after she vanished. Max whined louder, pushing his head into Jake's lap. Jake whispered, "You were with Dad when he found this, weren't you?" Max didn't move. Jake turned to the file marked Ellie Mae Carson, missing person 2013. He opened it. The first page was a photo of Ellie, the same face from the bracelet box. But in this one, she looked younger, less posed. Behind her again, that swing set. Jake flipped through the pages. The report was too thin. One officer's statement caught his eye. Family hesitant to speak. Father says he feels watched. Suggested Officer Thomas back off. Jake's breath caught. Back off, he muttered. That's what they told Dad. He searched for more notes from his father. In the margins, scribbled in pencil, a line read, "He knows." "And he wears a badge?" Jake closed the file, hands shaking. Max barked once, then stared at the door. "You want to go back?" "Again?" Jake asked. "There's more?" Max stood slowly, his joints creaking, but his eyes burning. Jake grabbed the flashlight and followed. This time, Max led him deeper past the broken fence at the edge of the property, through a narrow path Jake didn't even know existed. Trees grew denser. Roots twisted beneath their feet. Finally, they came to a clearing, abandoned cars rusting in the bush. An old, tilted shed. Graffiti peeled off the sides. Jake whispered, "What is this place?" Max approached the shed, sniffed around the base, and stopped at a crack in the wall. He barked sharp and sudden. Jake moved closer, heart thudding. He peered through the slat. Inside, empty crates, broken furniture, and in the far corner, a child's drawing pinned to the wall. Jake forced the door open. It groaned loud enough to wake ghosts. Inside, he walked over to the paper. It was faded, but still legible. A stick figure family, a girl in the middle, and behind them, a tall man in a blue uniform. His face scratched out. Jake turned to Max. This was her hideout, wasn't it? Max sniffed the paper. Eyes on the far wall. Jake followed his gaze. He said no one would believe me. Jake's stomach twisted. Silence. Max didn't move. Jake, forgotten shed, memories swirling like dust in sunlight. Far, had probably seen what Jake just saw. Anyone, because someone made sure he didn't single quotes. Not this time. He knelt beside Max and "Are you? You're the only one who never gave up?" Resting against Jake's leg. Jake whispered, "I won't." Rustled through the trees. Jake stood, took the drawing, with Max by his side, and though they were surrounded, something shift, like the truth had taken one cautious. It was supposed to be a normal Tuesday morning. Jake had the day off. The air was a slow walk to his bowl, a long drink of water, and a satisfied sigh. But as Jake poured himself a cup of coffee, Max jolted up. Twitched. He was alert, focused. Jake froze. "What is it?" Jake walked to the window, followed Max's gaze. There was nothing. Still, Jake felt it too unease. A weight in his chest, like something just down. "Let's go." Back in the forest, Max led again. His purpose never wavered. Jake followed without question. The hollowed tree, the forgotten shed. But Max didn't stop. That Jake had never entered. Branches cracked underfoot. Leaves rustled over. The darker it became. Finally, Max stopped in front of an old hunting cabin. The windows were broken and the front door hung open slightly. Jake stared. Max growled softly. Jake stepped closer, hand on his holstered weapon. Silence. He stepped inside. The air was thick with mold and dust. Old cans, a torn sleeping bag. Jake's flashlight cut through, pinned to the wall. A faded photo of Ellie, next to it one of Jake's father. Outside, he turned fast, weapon drawn. "Who's there?" Silence. Beep, warning. Jake stepped out of the cabin, scanning the tree line. Someone was. "Yourself," Jake shouted. "Leaves are US to LED. A figure stepped in. Hoodie up, face in shadow. Jake tightened his grip. "Who are you?" "Rough and low." "You don't want to dig this deep, officer." Jake held his ground. The man took one step back. "Your father made the same mistake." Jake snarled, stepping forward. "Back off," Jake ordered. "Tell me what you know." "The truth won't bring her back, and it won't save your mutt." Max lunged forward. The man flinched and disappeared into the trees. Jake ran after him. The man was fast, too fast. Within seconds, he was gone. Jake stood panting in him. Max caught up, limping slightly. "Why would he threaten you, Max?" He paused. "Unless you saw the cabin." They returned inside, where Jake now noticed a file folder tucked beneath. Free inside. Crime scene photos never seen before. A log of a hand-drawn map of the woods with certain spots marked in red. Jake whispered. Max sat in the doorway, watching the forest like a soldier guarding a battlefield. Whispered, "That guy, he knew my dad, and he knew about you." Max at him. "You were there, weren't you?" "With him, the day he died?" Max's head slightly. Jake clutched the file tighter. That night, he scanned the photo. To drive, but sleep wouldn't come. Every time he closed his. The photo of Ellie pinned next to his dad's. The threat. The next morning, Jake knocked on Sergeant O'Neill's office door. Cassette in the other. "I found this in an abandoned cabin." O'Neill looked. "Off-grid?" Max led me. "There." O'Neill raised an eye. "These days." Jake nodded slowly. "I think he's been holding on to this. Whatever it is, he's showing me what my dad wanted me to find." Oh. His face darkened. This wasn't in any of our records." Inside made it disappear. O'Neill looked at him. "And I think you're right." The precinct, staring into the trees across the road. The wind rustled. Max sat beside him. Jake said quietly, "That man yesterday, he warned me." Stared ahead, unmoved. Jake glanced down. "They're scared of you, old man." Jake smiled faintly. "Good." He crouched beside Max, voice low. "Word of yours. I need it." Max looked at him, and in that good, just as he always had, shadows had returned, but so had the light, and it walked on. The forest was too quiet. Jake noticed it the next morning as he and Max followed the same. No birds, no squirrels. He couldn't quite understand. Max's ears stayed alert the entire way. He said, "You feel it too, don't you?" Max didn't bark. Older, but driven, they reached the clearing with the rotted shed, the place. Jake stepped inside. Flashlight scanning each corner. It looked the same. Max's body tensed. He walked over to the far wall. Then he started digging, not deep, just brushing his paw along the floorboard. You found something again? He pried the boards up. Beneath them was hollowed it out. Inside, a muddy child sneaked on the side. Jake felt a lump rise in his throat. Max whimpered softly. It's hers, isn't it? He pulled out backpack and slid the shoe in. Something about this didn't feel right. Why was it destroyed like the Garrison house? Max sniffed deeper, pawing at the dirt aside and found another photo. This one was torn in half. Its face is cut off. Only a partial hand rested. It looked like they wore a police badge on the wrist. Tried to erase the truth. Suddenly Max barked. Jake stood up, spinning toward the door. Close. Jake turned off his flashlight. The sound stopped. You shouldn't be here, Thomas. Jake called himself. Silence, then the soft crunch of. Jake rushed outside, but no one was there. He turned. Max growled in agreement. Back at the and the torn photo to O'Neill, the sergeant's face. Act brand listed in the original missing persons report. Ellie was seen wearing. Jake pointed at her shoulder. O'Neill squinted. That badge. Jake nodded grimly. Someone in you to the family, maybe even someone assigned to protect them. Back, rubbing his temples. This case. Shook his head. It's not cursed. It's covered. His father's old notebook again. One scribbled note stood out. Whispers, said the woods told her where to go. The whispering woods. He turned to Max. Max lifted his head slowly. Jake grabbed a flashlight and Max close behind. The trees felt heavier tonight, bending. Jake let Max lead. The old dog turned away from the usual patch of forest Jake had never dared explore. Jacket. Roots nearly tripped him, but Max was steady. Jake's mind couldn't yet grasp. After Max stopped. Jake scanned the area. Just a patch of earth near a dry stream bed, but desperate now. Like time was running out. Jake fast, a small, shallow wooden box. Just rotted pine, barely holding together. Jake lifted his hands. Inside, another child's drawing, this one new. Marks bright. It showed a figure in a window, and holding something in his hand. Jake turned it over. Written me sleep. Jake felt the air leave his lungs. Max. They made her draw this, Jake whispered, or maybe tell someone. He looked around the trees. And for the first time, how much this forest had seen. Back at home. Max lay beside him, head resting on Jake's boot. You've been holding on to this longer than I've been alive. I could have asked. Dad more? I wish he didn't have to die. Max stirred then, letting out a low, soft sound. Not quite a cry. Jake looked down at him. You missing too, huh? Woods. Jake followed his gaze. The trees didn't whisper. Waiting. And so was the truth? He sat by the window, shotgun across his lap. Tree line. Max was curled beside the door, ears twitching. Something was out there, watching, waiting, he replayed. In his mind. You shouldn't be here, Thomas. Who? Not just his last name, his father's name. It was personal. Morning came gray and wet. Max stood by the door, tail low, alert. There? Jake asked. Max didn't move. Didn't. The locks around the house twice. Then he opened the gun his dad had left behind. Old, but still under his jacket. Let's take a drive. Jake of Officer Wendell, the only man his father had marked in. He hadn't been seen at the precinct in years, retired. A trailer at the edge of town. Jake drove through the back gate. Max shifted in the passenger seat, nose. Oh, Jake parked and stepped out, the trailer grass waist high. But as Jake walked up the fresh boot prints in the mud, recent. He knocked. No. Again, louder. Officer Wendell? It's Jake. Nothing. Jake tried the door. Unlocked. He pushed it open. Oh? The air inside was thick with dust and old cigarette. Light flickered above. The walls were covered in old new yellowed and curling. Max entered behind him. No. He stopped. Jake turned. And saw it too, a photo center on a corkboard. Her missing poster. Seen before, a photo of Max, younger, standing beside, and scrawled in black ink beneath it, the dog remembers. What the hell? Max growled, deep. A creak from the back room. Jake drew his weapon. Silence, then a rush of movement. Someone dark. Jake chased him. Max right behind, out the back door. In. Jake shouted, but the man was fast. As the one in the woods. Jake followed, heart and jumping over roots. Max sprinted ahead and glanced back once his face disappeared into a thicket. When Jake reached it, he found Max stood panting, eyes wide, scanning. Jake whispered. Max didn't look away from the woods. They walked back slowly. Jake searched the walls again. On the small kitchen table sat old entries. She was here. I heard her singing. I should have stopped it. He's still in uniform. Jake sat heavily in the creaky chair. It all made. Wendell guy had been involved? Maybe not directly, but he knew. He'd watched it happen. And he'd kept it secret all these years because someone else, someone still in power, was the monster. Jake whispered, he's scared of you, Max. Max laid down at Jake's feet, chest heaving. Jake picked up one more photo. This one showed his father alone. Standing in front of the precinct, expression unreadable, written on the back. He got too close. Now he's gone. Jake clenched. His jaw, not this time. That night, Jake installed new cameras around the house. Motion sensors, alarms. Max stayed near him the entire time, never once going to sleep. At 2:17 a.m. One of the cameras pinged as Jake rushed to the monitor. A figure stood at the edge of the woods. Not moving, not approaching. Just watching. Jake whispered, "It's him." Max growled behind him. By the time Jake grabbed his gun and stepped outside, the figure was gone. No footprints. No sound. Just the wind in the trees. Max barked once into the darkness, a sound full of warning, full of memory. Jake whispered, "You knew this wasn't over, didn't you?" Max sat beside him, staring into the trees. They both waited, because the past was no longer buried. It had risen, and it had a face. One they still hadn't seen. Jake spent the next morning at the town archive. The basement smelled like mildew and ink, and the flickering lights gave everything a ghostly glow. Rows of metal filing cabinets lined the walls, and each drawer groaned like it hadn't been opened in years. He placed the old photo on the table, the one from the cabin. Ellie in the center, the partial hand with the badge wristband. The rest of the image had been torn. But Jake had an idea. He pulled out the town's department yearbooks, old employee rosters with portraits, photos from parades, events, and award ceremonies. He flipped through each page, fingers shaking slightly. Then he found it. A department-wide photo from 2012. Every officer in uniform. Jake leaned in. There it was, the same uniform, same wristband, same silver badge tilted the same way. And that hand. It matched the one in the photo with Ellie. Jake whispered, Deputy Chief Langston. The second highest ranking officer in the department, still serving. Jake took out his phone, snapped a photo of the yearbook page and sent it to O'Neill. With a short text, found a match. It's Langston. Less than a minute later, his phone buzzed. O'Neill, meet me, we talk in person. Trust no one. Jake packed the photo, tucked the yearbook back into place, and left his heart thudding harder than before. At the precinct, Jake waited in the parking lot until O'Neill finally emerged. The sergeant's face looked grimmer than usual. He opened the passenger door and got in without a word. Jake spoke first. It was Langston, I'm sure of it. O'Neill nodded slowly. I figured. Jake blinked. You knew? Suspected, O'Neill said. Your dad left a note for me before he died. Told me if anything ever happened to him, Langston should be the first name I looked into. But I didn't have proof. And Langston, he's protected. Jake's voice dropped. You think he hurt Ellie? I think he knew where she was. And I think he made sure the search led nowhere. Jake stared out the window. He's still wearing that badge. Still walking free, which makes him dangerous, O'Neill said. He's the type who doesn't get scared easily. If he knows we're close, he might panic. And when a man like that panics, Jake nodded. People disappear. O'Neill handed him an old folder. Your dad compiled this. I kept it hidden. Names, dates, suspicions, Langston's all over it. He was always around when evidence went missing, when tips went cold. Jake opened the folder. Page after page handwritten. Notes, clipped articles, half-redacted statements. Then he saw it, a report from 2013. K-9 Unit Max reacted violently during final search. Jake read aloud. Handler removed him from scene due to erratic behavior. Area declared clear. O'Neill tapped the paper. That area was the exact location where Max found the box. Jake whispered. They pulled him off it. He almost found Ellie's hiding place and they stopped him. Max had known all along, they just never listened. Jake clenched his jaw. He tried to show them, O'Neill said quietly, and they buried the truth. That evening, Jake sat on the porch, folder in hand, watching the sky turn orange. Max rested beside him, breathing deep, eyes half closed. You were the only one who saw everything, Jake whispered. And they made you watch it fade. Max opened his eyes slowly. Jake stroked his fur. But you didn't forget. Not after all these years. The wind picked up, carrying the smell of rain. Then Jake's phone buzzed, unknown number. Stop digging. Let the dead rest. Jake stared at it. Max growled, low and steady. Jake deleted the message. No chance. At midnight, Max stood by the door again. He barked once. Jake grabbed his flashlight, gun, and the evidence bag with the child's sneaker and drawing. They walked into the woods. The air thick and silent. Max didn't lead toward the old shed or the dig site. He turned toward the east edge of the forest, where the trees grew tight and the fog hung heavier. After 20 minutes, Max stopped. He stared at a single tree, ordinary, tall, moss-covered. Jake tilted his head. What's special about this one? Max barked twice, pawing at the base. Jake dropped to his knees and started digging. Just under the soil, wrapped in a plastic sheet, was another cassette. Jake stood slowly, heart racing. Another message? Max sat quietly. Jake stuffed it into his backpack. They returned home in silence. Jake dusted off the tape player and hit play. This time, the voice was clearer. He said, I was his little secret. He wore a silver badge. I don't like the blue light anymore. Then a sob, soft, terrified. Jake froze. He pressed rewind. Played it again. That voice. It was Ellie. A second tape. A second message. Buried like a secret that refused to stay quiet. Jake whispered. She tried to leave a trail. Max stared at the player. Jake looked back at the woods outside. We're not stopping now. Max let out a low, soft growl. Jake didn't need translation. Neither of them were going to let this disappear. Again. The next morning was drenched in fog. Jake could barely see past his front porch. The world felt muted, like the forest itself was holding its breath. Max stood by the door before Jake even finished his coffee, tail still, eyes sharp. Jake strapped on his gear. All right, boy, he said quietly. Lead the way. They followed a new trail, Max's nose low to the earth, step after steady step. The trees here grew thicker, darker, the sun struggling to break through. After 20 minutes, they arrived at something Jake hadn't expected. An old bunker, concrete, hidden by overgrowth. Almost invisible unless you were looking for it. Jake whispered. You've been here before, haven't you? Max sniffed a heavy door, then looked back at Jake. Jake pulled out his flashlight and slowly turned the rusty handle. The door groaned as it opened, revealing a narrow stairwell descending into darkness. They stepped down, one creaking stair at a time. And then there it was, a dim blue light, exactly like Ellie described on the tapes. Jake froze. The blue light. Max let out a low growl. At the bottom was a single room, small, cold, cement walls, and a single flickering, fluorescent bulb that cast everything in that strange, sickly hue. The air smelled like mildew and old copper. There were remnants of something horrible here, a child's mattress on the floor, torn, stained, chains on the wall, and a name carved into the cement. Call on Ellie. Jake staggered back. No. Max moved to the mattress, sniffing, tail between his legs. Jake pulled out his phone and snapped photos of everything. Then he spotted a box in the corner, old, metal, like the first one. Max had dug up. Inside were drawings, 4 of them, each one more disturbing than the last. Ellie and a tall man, Ellie in a cage. Ellie with her hands over her ears while a badge glowed under the blue light. And one that showed her hiding a cassette behind a tree. Jake whispered, She left a map. Max barked, suddenly short, urgent. Jake turned. Footsteps echoed above. Someone was in the stairwell. He quickly turned off the flashlight. They waited in the dark. A shadow appeared at the top of the stairs. The figure didn't come down but stood there, watching. Then a low voice echoed down the stairwell. You weren't supposed to find this. Jake recognized it. Langston. Max bared his teeth, low growl rolling in his chest. Jake called out, You were there. You kept her down here. No response. Langston's boots shifted. You don't understand what was at stake. Jake stepped forward. A little girl's life was at stake. Langston exhaled, almost casually. She was a runaway. No one cared. Jake's hands shook. My father did. That's why you silenced him. Silence. Then Langston said, Your dad wouldn't stop pushing. I warned him. He didn't listen. Max barked again, sharp, threatening. Jake raised his voice. What happened to Ellie? Where is she? But Langston was gone, vanished into the fog. Jake chased him up the stairs and out the door, but the forest had already swallowed him whole. He was gone. Jake turned to Max. He was watching us. Following this whole time, Max's nose twitched. His old legs struggled as he caught the scent. Jake whispered, We need help. This is bigger than just us. Back at the precinct, Jake stormed into O'Neill's office. I found the place, he said, breathless. A basement, a prison. She was there, O'Neill. O'Neill stood up. Where? Jake pulled out his phone, scrolling through the photos. Look, chains, her name carved in the wall, the mattress drawings. O'Neill stared at the images, jaw tight. Jake continued. Langston showed up. He knew I was there. He's watching. U.S.? O'Neill muttered. We need to move fast. I'll call internal affairs. We'll get federal oversight. Jake grabbed his arm. We don't have time. What if Ellie's still alive? O'Neill met his eyes. Jake? No, I mean... What if she's still out there, hidden, hurt, alone? O'Neill looked at the photo of the drawing with the cassette hidden behind the tree. Then we need to find that last tape. That night, Jake returned to the woods with Max. They searched tree after tree, following the drawing's Hinslow branches, broken bark, a curved trunk. Finally, Max stopped. He pawed at the base of a willow tree. Nose buried in the dirt. Jake dug with his hands, and there it was, a third cassette, the final message. They raced home. Jake slammed it into the player and pressed play. Ellie's voice, shaking but clear. If someone finds this, I tried. To escape, he said he'd bury me like he buried the truth. Please don't forget me. My name is Ellie Mae Carson. I was real. Then silence. Jake turned to Max, eyes burning. She never stopped fighting. Max whined, gently nuzzling Jake's knee. Jake whispered, "Neither will we." This was no longer about uncovering a cold case. This was about justice, and Jake swore on everything. He had left. Langston would not walk away again. Jake sat in his truck outside his father's old house, the sun low in the sky, casting long shadows across the porch. The house had been untouched since the funeral. His mother had moved in with her sister shortly after, unable to live with the memories. But Jake hadn't come back here, not until now. Max jumped down from the passenger seat, limping slightly, and sniffed the dry grass like he remembered every step his partner took on that land. Jake unlocked the front door. The house smelled like dust, paper, and the ghost of old coffee. He moved room by room, his father's scent, his voice somehow still clinging to the walls. Jake entered the study last. Everything was the same. The desk still held old notebooks. A framed photo of Jake as a child with Max in the background sat on the shelf, and behind the bookshelf. Jake knelt down, pulled aside the paneling, and found the old floorboard that creaked differently, a hidden compartment. Inside was a thick envelope, yellowed with time. He opened it slowly. Inside were handwritten letters dated just 2 weeks before his father's death. One caught his eye first. It was addressed to Jake. "Son, if you're reading this, something has happened to me. Don't trust the man in uniform who smiles too easily. He knows things. I tried to protect you and Max. If Max is still alive, follow him. He remembers the things I wasn't allowed to speak of. He'll take you to the place I never could." Jake stared at the words, his heart pounding in his chest. The man in uniform who smiles too easily. Langston. Another letter, not addressed to anyone, was filled with frantic writing repetitions. She was alive. I heard her singing. Max found the chain. I found the mark. Langston found me, Jake whispered. He knew they were on to him. He flipped to the last page, a torn piece of a police report with something scrawled across the bottom. July 2nd, 2013, last shift. Dispatch said call was canceled. But I never canceled it. Max wouldn't move. He knew she was still there. Jake sat back, breathing heavily. He died because he didn't stop. Max walked over and pressed his head into Jake's chest. Jake whispered, "You were with him, weren't you?" That night he vanished. Max didn't move. Didn't blink. Jake held the letters close. "Tell me what you remember." Later that evening, Jake visited the precinct again, this time alone. Langston wasn't in, which was either lucky or suspicious. Jake accessed the radio archives buried deep in the system and searched for calls made the night of July 2nd, 2013. One popped up. Unit 341, suspicious noise. Coordinates Edgewood Forest, 7:23 p.m. It was marked canceled. Jake played the audio. "This is Officer Thomas. I'm en route. Max is with me. Cancel that. Max is picking something up. We're going in." A second voice, crackling over static, came seconds later. "Thomas, stand down. You're not cleared. Return to base." Jake froze. The voice was familiar. Langston. But Thomas didn't respond. There was a long pause. Then silence. The call cut off. Jake rewound it. Played it again. Same thing. His father never called back. Never made it home. Max had returned alone the next morning, found by a local hunter, bruised and bloodied, and taken back to the department. The story was that Officer Thomas had gone missing in the woods, but now Jake knew the truth. He was silenced. And Max had seen it all. That night, Jake sat by the fire pit behind his house, Max beside him. He laid the letters out. The cassette tapes, the drawings, the report, everything. "Max, Dad trusted you, even when no one else did." Max lay his head on Jake's lap, eyes tired but open. "I think that night, when he didn't come home, I think you tried to protect him. You probably fought like hell." Jake rubbed Max's ears. But no one listened. They just assumed you ran. He looked out at the trees. I don't know how you kept going all these years, but I'm here now. We're gonna finish this. At sunrise, Jake returned to the bunker. O'Neill met him at the entrance with 2 internal affairs agents. They spent hours photographing, collecting evidence, and logging everything. The IA agents were stunned. Why didn't anyone ever search this place? One asked. Jake said quietly, because someone made sure they didn't. Max sat near the door, watching silently. Then one of the agents came forward, holding up something. Wrapped in plastic, a locket. Inside, Ellie's school photo. Jake's hands trembled. She was real, he whispered. She fought so hard to be remembered. The agent nodded. We'll open a full investigation. Langston's going to have questions to answer. Jake looked down at Max. And for the first time since this all began, he felt like they weren't alone in the fight anymore. The system that buried his father might finally be forced to look in the mirror. Max nuzzled his leg gently. Jake whispered, We're close, buddy. The truth wasn't just rising. It was roaring. It was raining by the time Jake and Max reached the far edge of Edgewood Forest. Thick fog curled between the trees, and the ground squished beneath their boots. The IA team had taken what they could. From the bunker, Langston had been placed on administrative leave, pending questioning, but Jake knew better. Langston wasn't going to wait. He was going to run, or worse, bury whatever else was left of the truth. That's why Jake was here, because there was still one piece missing. Ellie. Where she went. How it ended. Max stopped at a dense patch of trees, somewhere Jake had never been. The wind howled louder here, and the pine needles were thick underfoot. Max began to dig, slowly, determined. Jake got down beside him. You sure? Max didn't look at him. Just dug deeper. After a few minutes, Jake hit something solid. Wood. Rotting. A box. Jake's breath caught. This wasn't a metal evidence box or a plastic container. This was a child's coffin. He paused. Heart thudding so hard it hurt. Gently, he pulled the box free and opened the creaking lid. Inside was a small bundle of bones, wrapped in a blanket. Next to them, a teddy bear with one eye missing, soaked in mildew. And beneath it, a photograph of Ellie. Jake dropped to his knees. Max let out a low whine, tail still, ears back. Jake whispered, She was right here. This whole time. Tears burned his eyes. Ellie hadn't just vanished. She had died alone, buried like trash in a forest. No one was supposed to wander. Jake gently rewrapped the remains and placed them into a clean evidence bag. Then he called O'Neill. The clearing was soon filled with flashing lights, forensic units, and quiet, horrified officers. Jake stood back, arms crossed, Max at his side, rain soaking through their jackets. O'Neill walked over, face pale. We'll get DNA confirmation, but it's her. Jake nodded slowly. She wasn't supposed to be found, he said. They thought no one would ever come this far. O'Neill looked down. Who buries a kid like that? Jake looked toward the trees. Someone who didn't want a headstone or questions? Someone who thought the dog wouldn't come back. Max sat beside the open grave, watching. Still, he hadn't barked. He hadn't moved. He just stared like he'd been here before. Like some part of him remembered. The press got wind of the discovery within 24 hours. Remains believed to be Ellie Mae Carson found in forest. K9 dog leads officer to hidden. Grave and cold case breakthrough. Jake stood before the cameras. Reluctantly. Max at his side, he kept his words short. She was real. She tried to tell us and we didn't listen. But Max, he never forgot. The reporters clung to the story of the loyal dog. The silent witness. The partner who solved the case years after everyone gave up, but Jake didn't care about headlines. He only cared about what came next. Langston was nowhere to be found. His house was cleared out, his badge left behind. Jake stared at the empty desk inside the precinct the next morning. Rage bubbling beneath his skin. He knew we were closing in, he said to O'Neill, and he ran. O'Neill nodded. Feds are issuing a warrant. Jake looked down at Max. He's not getting away. Later that night, Jake sat in his living room, the lights low, the rain still tapping against the windows. He stared at the photo of Ellie, the Same girl he'd grown up hearing rumors about, the same girl who disappeared one day without a trace, and the same girl who'd left behind whispers, drawings, cassette tapes. And the heart of one loyal dog. Jake reached over and scratched behind Max's ears. You never gave up on her. Max let out a deep, slow breath. Jake smiled through the pain. I get it now. You didn't just lose your partner when Dad died. You lost your purpose until now. Max licked his hand, slow and gentle. Jake whispered, We did it. The next morning, a small vigil was held at the forest's edge. A cross had been placed at the site, surrounded by candles, letters, and toys left by townspeople who barely remembered Ellie but were moved by the tragedy. Jake stood off to the side. A woman approached. Her hair was gray now, eyes red. I'm Ellie's mother, she said, voice trembling. I never knew where she went. They told me she must have run away. I thought she was angry with me. Jake shook his head gently. She didn't run. She was taken. But she fought hard. She left clues. And Max, he found them. The woman knelt in front of Max. She reached out, hand shaking, and touched his head. Max leaned in. Gently, she saved my drawings, the woman whispered. Even as a kid, she always believed someone would come. Jake swallowed hard. She was right, he said. It just took a while. That night, Jake sat alone on the porch with Max curled at his feet. The sky was clear. Stars blinked above. The wind rustled the trees soft this time, like a song being sung from far away. Jake whispered, She can rest now. Max let out a sigh. And for the first time since all of this began, the forest felt still. As if the trees themselves had been holding their breath. Waiting for this moment. The next morning, Jake stood in front of the precinct's corkboard with Langston's photo at the center, surrounded by pins, maps, cassette, transcriptions. And now, Ellie's confirmed autopsy report. The cause of death, blunt force trauma, time of death, estimated. Just days after she went missing. Jake read the last line aloud. No attempt made to report or bury through official channels. O'Neill muttered behind him. He buried her like trash, then showed up to work the next day like nothing happened. Jake clenched his jaw. We need to smoke him out. O'Neill raised an eyebrow. How? Jake's eyes narrowed. We leak it. By afternoon, Jake had sent an anonymous tip to a local blogger known for sensational crime news. Retired officer suspected in cold case murder of Ellie Mae Carson. Official charges coming soon. Then he waited, and so did Max. By sunset, the article was live and already spreading. Jake paced the porch, phone on the table beside him. Max lay alert, watching the driveway, ears twitching every time a car passed in the distance. At 9:12 p.m., Jake's phone buzzed. Unknown number. You just signed your own death warrant. Jake texted back one word. Coward. By midnight. Jake was back in the woods. This time. He wasn't following Max, he was waiting. He'd left his father's old truck at the cabin site. Doors open, lights on. The cassette player repeating Ellie's voice over and over again, a message. A memory, a bait. Jake sat 20 yards away in the brush, night vision goggles on. Gun holstered at his side. Max lay beside him, tense and ready. Minutes passed. Then, footsteps. A figure approached the truck slowly. Langston. Same walk, same height. Same leather gloves Jake had seen in the photo with Ellie. Langston stepped up to the truck and stared at the cassette player. Ellie's voice crackled. Please don't forget me. Langston reached into the truck. Jake moved fast. Gun raised. Don't. Langston froze. Jake stepped out. Hands where I can see them. Langston turned slowly. Calm expression. You're making a mistake, Jake. Max stepped forward, growling. Jake didn't flinch. You buried her. You lied? You let my father die? Langston scoffed. Your father didn't listen. He got too close to things he didn't understand. Jake stepped closer. Like what? A little girl telling the truth? Langston sneered. She should have never been out there alone. She had no idea who she was dealing with. You, Jake growled. She was dealing with you, Langston laughed, once cold and cruel. And now you think this will end me? What are you going to do, arrest me? No, Jake said, steady. I'm just going to let the world hear you. Langston froze. Jake turned his phone around live stream, blinking red. Thousands watching. Every word. Every threat. Every glance broadcast. Langston. Lunge. Max reacted, instantly launching at him with a speed Jake hadn't seen in years. Teeth sank into Langston's arm as the older man screamed and hit the ground. Jake rushed in and cuffed him. Blood spilled into the leaves. Langston writhed, cursing. You don't know what you've done. Jake leaned down. I've made sure Ellie's name is never forgotten. Back at the precinct, the world exploded. Langston was arrested. The live stream had gone viral overnight. National outlets picked up the story. K9. Dog helps crack 12-year cold case. Former officer arrested in murder of 8-year-old girl. Jake stood outside the interview room as Langston sat slumped in his chair, bandaged, eyes dead. O'Neill walked up. He's not talking. Not yet, Jake said quietly. Let him sit. Let him rot in his silence. Max was in the hallway, head down. Resting, the adrenaline was gone. His body was sore. His legs stiff. Jake knelt beside him. You did it, buddy. You brought him in. Max let out a tired exhale. Jake whispered. Dad would be proud. Later that night, Jake took Max to the only place that mattered, Ellie's grave, freshly marked. Decorated with flowers, stuffed animals, and a stone etched with her name, Ellie Mae Carson, 2005 to 2013, you were always real. Jake sat on the cold grass beside it. Max laid down, resting his head on the stone. Jake whispered, we gave her peace. The wind rustled softly through the trees. Jake looked at Max. The old dog blinked slow. Heavy eyes, you rest now too? He leaned back, eyes on the stars. Tomorrow would bring headlines. Court dates. Press. But tonight, it was just them, the grave, the truth, the silence, and the dog who remembered everything. 3 days after Langston's arrest, Jake was summoned to the town hall for a ceremony he didn't ask for. Cameras were lined up in neat rows, local politicians stood shoulder to shoulder, and the mayor held a polished medal in her hand. Today, she announced, we honor Officer Jake Thomas and K9 Max for solving one of the most haunting cases in our town's history. The crowd clapped. Max sat politely at Jake's feet, tail giving a faint wag. Jake didn't smile. He stepped forward as the medal was pinned to his chest, then knelt beside Max as the mayor draped a ribbon with a gold paw emblem around the dog's neck. The crowd erupted in applause. Jake stood again, took the mic, and looked straight into the cameras. We didn't come looking for medals. We came looking for the truth. Silence. Jake continued, voice tight, controlled. My father, Officer Daniel Thomas, died trying to bring Ellie Carson home. Max was there. He saw what happened. And for over a decade, he waited for someone to listen. He paused, glanced down at Max. He remembered what everyone else forgot, or chose to forget. There was a shift in the room, uneasy murmurs. Jake finished quietly. If we really want justice, this can't be the end. Because Langston didn't act alone. He stepped away from the mic. O'Neill met him at the edge of the stage. Bold move. Jake nodded. It's not over. Back at the precinct, Jake sat in front of the evidence board alone. Max dozed. Nearby, one paw over his nose, Jake stared at a new piece of evidence, a signed memo from 2013, written 3 days after Ellie's disappearance. It gave Langston permission to redirect resources from the search signed by then-Chief Barnes. O'Neill entered the room quietly, holding 2 coffees. You were right, Barnes protected him. Jake took the cup. He's retired, right? Living upstate, O'Neill replied. Wife sick, he's out of the loop, might be vulnerable. Jake raised an eyebrow. Think he'll talk? O'Neill sighed. He might, but it depends on how guilty he feels. Jake tapped the board. We find out who else knew. We shine light on every corner they tried to keep in shadow. O'Neill gave a grim smile. Looks like we're reopening an entire decade of secrets. Jake looked at Max. We've got the best memory on 4 legs. Let's use it. 2 days later, Jake and Max drove north. Barnes lived in a quiet, wood-paneled house surrounded by pine trees. It was peaceful, like nothing bad had ever happened. Jake knocked on the door. An elderly man opened it. Chief Barnes. Hair white, eyes tired. He looked at Jake for a long second, then down at Max. His face fell. Jake said gently, "You remember him?" Barnes nodded slowly. "Daniel's dog. I never thought I'd see him again." Jake stepped inside. "We need to talk about Ellie Carson." Barnes didn't argue. He led them to a living room lined with dusty books and framed awards. Jake sat on the edge of his seat. "Langston was protected," Barnes nodded. "We all knew. But we didn't all agree. Then why didn't anyone stop him?" Barnes looked out the window, voice soft. "Langston had friends in higher places, people with money. People who saw a missing girl as a liability," Jake asked. "Did you ever see Ellie?" "No," Barnes whispered. "But I saw her drawings. I saw the way Max reacted at the scene. Your father begged us to keep digging. Langston said he was paranoid. Sighed he'd ruin the department. And you chose the badge over a little girl." Barnes didn't answer. Jake stood. "Ellie deserved better." Barnes looked up. "I know." He reached into a drawer and handed Jake a small recorder. "This is the last conversation I had with Langston before I retired." Jake pressed play. Langston's voice crackled. "She's gone. And if you keep asking questions, so will you." Then Barnes's voice, "I can't live with this, Langston." "Then don't." Click. Jake pocketed the tape. "Thanks," he said quietly. "We'll let the truth do what you couldn't." Back in Edgewood, Jake handed the tape to O'Neill. "This puts him in conspiracy. Barnes might walk, but Langston's not alone anymore." O'Neill shook his head. "It's deeper than we thought." Jake said, "I want to reopen every cold case Langston touched, every missing girl, every search called off early. He didn't. Just do this once." O'Neill nodded. "Let's dig." That evening, Jake took Max to the river where they used to train with his dad. The air was cool, and the water moved slowly under the bridge. Jake tossed a small stick into the stream. Max didn't chase it. He just stood beside Jake, head bowed slightly, watching the water. Jake knelt down. "You tired, old boy?" Max leaned into him. Jake hugged his neck. "We're close, but I don't know if I'm ready to let go yet." Max let out a soft huff. Jake smiled faintly. "Yeah, I know. You've carried this longer than I have." Later that night, Jake placed the medal on his father's grave. Not his, not Max's, just a silent tribute, a promise kept. As the moonlight stretched across the stones, Jake whispered, "We're not done, but this was for you." Massey sat beside the grave and lifted his head. A long, low howl echoed through the trees. It wasn't for attention. It was for memory. For grief, for justice. And for a girl who waited too long to be found. The wind howled through the trees like it remembered everything.